Have you ever felt like you're holding a piece of history? That's exactly how I felt when I came across this. 20 rolls of expired Kodak Tri-X, still in its original packaging, just like the day it left the factory floor in Rochester, New York. And they're older than I am, but that should be obvious. They expired in 1983, when film was still king, and my parents were still in high school. So what's the big deal with Tri-X then? First launched in 1940 and available in 35mm and 120 starting in 1954. Tri-X has captured everything from the everyday to the extraordinary. This isn't just any black and white film. Tri-X is the black and white film. Even if you don't shoot film, when you picture classic black and white photos, if I had to bet, you're probably picturing Tri-X. It's got this rich, gritty texture and bold contrast. It's become a favorite for photojournalists, street photographers, and documentarians alike. Names like Anton Corbin, Don McCullen, Gary Winogrand, Jane Brown, Mary Ellen Mark, Penny Smith, and Sebastião Salgado, just to name a few. Their work speaks volumes, and a lot of it was on Tri-X. I'm sure you've seen their work before, and I wish I could show you here. But this isn't the same Tri-X you can buy today. So how is this different than the new stuff? It turns out it's not that easy of a question to answer. Tri-X has gone through a few reformulations over the years, with some major changes. Starting in 1960, when the speed changed from 200 to 400, although that was mostly due to changes in the ASA standard. And then, as commonly stated in 2007, Kodak reduced the silver content, likely to cut costs as silver prices rose. But to photographers like Sebastião Salgado, this felt like a serious downgrade. In 2009, even Salgado claimed, "The quality of today's black and white films has drastically declined," which, when coming from someone who's known for their iconic black and white work, it really makes you think. Fans of the new Tri-X praise it for its finer grain, while others insist the older version had this bite and texture that's just gone now. And many say the new stuff needs longer development times to give it acceptable contrast. And that's where it gets interesting. Kodak has been very quiet about these changes. Any official details from Kodak on the reformulations? If they ever existed, they're buried deep. All we have are a handful of vague articles with no sources aside from Wikipedia, and the memories of photographers who've been around long enough to remember. And that's where the trail ended. But am I just going to settle for that? Not a chance. I'm determined to uncover the truth. So let's start with the most suspect data point we have. 2007. That's the year Tri-X supposedly changed. Wikipedia says it, and so does nearly every article or blog post. But most of them are just citing Wikipedia, if they reference anything at all. I knew something wasn't right when I found articles mentioning the change. Published in 2004. While it's true I can't find any official press releases from Kodak, there are other clues. First, I reviewed the current Tri-X tech sheet from 2016. This is the one currently available on their website. Nothing revealing here. But then, I looked at the massive dev chart, which lists multiple times for different developers like HC110. One of these times is longer than Kodak's official time, noting that Kodak's is too short. And another is even longer, with a note that says, "Data is taken from a previous version of this film. Starting point time should be similar." Then I found a 2007 tech sheet. The development times are the same as the latest sheet. This suggests that the new Tri-X must have been out in 2007, matching Wikipedia's claims. But what about those 2004 articles we found earlier? Take a look at this. The first page of the 2007 tech sheet has an official statement from Kodak about the changes. To reflect our enduring commitment to black and white photography, black and white film production will take place in an even more advanced film coating facility. New technology applied to these superior time-tested emulsions will result in slightly different processing times for the film family. But the same great films, those you've known and trusted for years, will still deliver the same breathtaking results. And here it is again in 2005 and in 2004. It's the same statement. Clearly the changes happened before 2007. But exactly when? Let's dig deeper. Here's a tech sheet from 2003. Bingo. Notice, Kodak Tri-X pan film has been replaced by Kodak Professional Tri-X 400/400TX. If we go back even further, we see that in 1999, it's still the old Tri-X pan film, distinct from the newer 400TX. So I think we can confidently say the new Tri-X was born sometime between June 1999 and April 2003. And I think that's as close as we're gonna get. So does Kodak officially state what changed? Not much is standing out here other than dev time, and that 120 is now on a thicker base stock. And as for the emulsion, I'm not going to pretend I know how to interpret the sensitometry data. So what now? Part of me thinks I should leave this historical artifact untouched. Sorry, Indy, this ain't museum material. I can't come this far and not experience the original Tri-X for myself. It's time to open this thing up. This has to be the first time this has been touched by human hands in over 40 years, if ever. It makes me wonder what Kodak's processes were like in the late 70s to early 80s, because it's very automated today. Smarter Everyday's series, where he visits the Kodak plant, is awesome. You should check it out if you haven't already seen it. I have to say I'm really liking this green and yellow backing paper. I'm expecting this film to have lost some speed and gained some base fog. Others have had luck with Tri-X of this age, around 50 to 80 ISO, but I don't want to leave it to guesswork. I'm going to meter for the ambient light. I noticed something weird with the internal meter this morning, so I don't trust it. Okay, I'm gonna stop him right here. Let's take a moment to chat. I want to be straight with you. I made some mistakes during this test, but that's kind of what this channel is about. Exploring, learning, and sharing that learning with you. I had in my mind I wanted to bracket down from 403rd stops, really nail it down to a real-world film speed. I've shot photos for a long time, but only started taking film seriously from a technical standpoint recently. I tried to use the meter to do all the calculations, since I didn't want to do all that third stop math in my head. I did have the thought that my camera only goes in half-stop increments, but naively thought the meter could figure it out. It won't. No amount of technology can turn a third into a half. What I should have done was take advantage of the EV scale on my lens to keep track of all those changes for me. If you're not familiar with EV or exposure value, it's a very useful system. I won't go into much detail now, but it's a combination of shutter speed and aperture that give a specific exposure. And conveniently, one EV is equivalent to one stop. Perfect for this test. And if you're new to this and don't know what that is, one stop indicates a halving or doubling of the light that hits the film. The same holds true for digital. I also didn't have an ideal base exposure because I was so set on using the meter to figure out my exposure bracketing, ignoring my better judgment. Here's a digital shot showing how our baseline exposure looks at 400 ISO. It really gives new meaning to expose for the shadows. The Tri-X shooting chart that came with the film, basically Sunny 16, would have me expose like this for a heavy overcast day. I personally would have preferred something in between like this. Let's get into the development. Following Kodak's original times, I did a 7.5 minute development with HC110 dilution B with agitation for 5 seconds every 30 seconds. Let me tell you, loading this roll was an ordeal. Old Tri-X base stock is super thin. I definitely felt that. I had to use some old 120 negatives I don't care about as a ramp to help me get it started on the reel, something that I normally never do. And my tip to you, keep your reels super dry and clean, wear gloves to keep the moisture down so the film doesn't get sticky, and have those helper negatives ready before you unspool your film. Don't ask me how I know. Another fun thing happened during development. I was so focused on getting the film started after several failed attempts that I ended up trapping the helper film on the reel. So I left it in, hoping it would get pushed to the center, but it ended up sticking to the film. So there are areas that didn't fully develop or fix. But hey, it's a great demonstration of what happens when film sticks together in the dev tank. The shots that didn't get developed were the ones that were 4.5 stops or more overexposed. And the good news is, we don't need them. Overall, I'm really impressed with how well this worked. For the test shots, I took the raw scans, inverted them, adjusted the exposure to center the histogram, and then fine-tuned it so the darkest parts were true black and the brightest were true white, just before clipping any details. I've found this method is great for comparing exposures, and looks good with a well-exposed negative. But one thing it doesn't show is how much you can recover in post from a poorly exposed negative. When I edit with that in mind, this is what I get. But here's a proper exposure. It still wins in my book. And what can we learn from this test? My best guess, this film works best somewhere between 32 and 64 ISO. For the first roll, I settled on 50 ISO. I went down to the lake and tried something new.
Wildlife photography on medium format. My 150mm lens didn't have nearly enough reach. A couple of shots were accidentally metered at 100 ISO. I also caught a nice sunset, but without any colored filters, the results were underwhelming. Here's a fellow photographer I found. Luckily he stayed still for my 8th second exposure. Not exactly the ideal setup for street photography, but I kinda made it work. And now for the real test. Starting with some night shots. I think these turned out great. For the rest of the roll, I played tourist around Seattle. Lighting was great at first. Overall, I'm pretty happy with these. For this one, my camera jammed because the lens wasn't fully seated. I retook the shot to be safe. Then I loaded up the new stuff. I have to say, the backing paper is so boring compared to the old one.
So I just made a huge mistake. This is my modern Tri-X. So I developed with about 400 mils instead of 500 mils. So I think the chances of this working out are low. I think one side of the film is going to look super weird. I'm honestly really disappointed. This comparison might be kind of junk. Let's hope for the best. So I guess looking at it, that's exactly 500. It comes up maybe about a 1/4 inch over the reel, so it might not be as bad as I thought. I do see images. Looks like it worked. Although our development time is going to be all messed up.
Since this roll isn't a perfect comparison, let's keep it quick. You can see where the developer fell short near the edges on some of these shots. This guy's beard was incredible. I couldn't resist taking this one. I kinda like this unconventional framing of the Space Needle. Trash cans seem to be all the rage right now. So here's my contribution. I think it's a creative take. Okay, time to do this right. We're back at Seattle Center. I should have taken this one the other day when the light was better. I'm reshooting some of the same shots for a direct comparison, but adding new ones to keep it fresh. So here's another note about development. The last roll was slightly underfixed. I mixed up a fresh batch for this project, following the Film Developing Cookbook's F24 recipe. This was the 4th roll I developed, and I increased the fix time by 20%. But I hadn't done a clearing test yet, because my last batch lasted so long. Before developing this next roll, I finally did a clearing test. Turns out the clearing time was 4 minutes and 40 seconds, which means this fixer was already well on its way to being exhausted. I referenced the cookbook again, and realized you're supposed to test when the film is wet. That makes sense. Film is fixed when it's wet. I tried it again after developing the last roll, and the clearing time dropped to 4 minutes and 10 seconds. But this fixer still exhausted way faster than I expected. Could it be because there's more silver in the older film? Maybe. I'm not really sure. Either way, it's a good reminder to keep an eye on your chemistry. Now for what we've been waiting for, the direct comparison. Expired is on the left, and new on the right. The old Tri-X has such a distinct look. It screams film with its pronounced grain. The new stuff feels sharper, though that could be because I stopped the lens down more, shooting at 400. Both deliver great but very different results. I think I missed focus on the old Tri-X shot here. With the shallower depth of field, it really shows. I do wonder if the unique character of the old stock comes from being expired, or if that's just how the original emulsion behaved. Either way, props to Kodak. These results are incredible for film over 40 years past its expiration date. I'm holding off on my final judgment because I think I can do an even better job. I'm also thinking about tracking down some other discontinued Kodak films to throw into the mix. If that sounds interesting, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Overall, I loved shooting the original Tri-X. I've got plenty left, so here's an idea. If there's enough interest, I'd love to share some with you guys. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to try it out, and I'll plan a giveaway on my up-and-coming discontinued Kodak black and white showdown. One last thing before I go. Tri-X just celebrated its 70th birthday, at least in 120 and 135. Totally unplanned, but the timing couldn't have been better for this. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. See you next time.